Hey guys, tonight we are going to do something that might trigger a little bit of claustrophobia. So just consider this your gentle warning. We aren't going to a cozy library or a rainy forest cabin. We are going down, straight down. We are going to the deepest point on the planet, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench. It is a place so hostile to human life that more people have walked on the surface of the moon than have visited the bottom of this trench. The pressure down there is roughly equivalent to having a fully loaded school bus balanced on your big toe. So, you probably wouldn't survive the first 10 milliseconds if you stepped outside, but luckily, we are staying inside tonight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps the channel float in the algorithm rather than sinking into the abyss. Also, drop a comment down below and let me know what city you are watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the global roll call. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on the deck of a research vessel, bobbing gently in the middle of the western Pacific Ocean. The first thing that hits you is the heat. It is a humid, oppressive tropical heat that makes your shirt stick to your back within seconds. The sun is blindingly bright, reflecting off the white steel of the ship and the endless, rolling blue mirror of the water. It feels almost impossible to imagine that in a few hours, you will be in a place where the temperature is just a few degrees above freezing and the darkness is absolute. You take a deep breath. It smells of salt, diesel fumes from the ship's engines, and that distinct, funky biological smell of the open sea. Here is a little obscure trivia for you right off the bat. That sea smell isn't actually salt. Salt doesn't have a smell. What you are smelling is a gas called dimethyl sulfide, which is released by dying bacteria and phytoplankton. So, essentially, you are inhaling the scent of billions of microscopic deaths. Romantic, right? But you aren't here to sunbathe. You are here from a machine hanging from the A-frame crane at the stern of the ship. It doesn't look like the submarines you see in movies. It isn't a long, sleek cigar shape with torpedo tubes and a handsome captain shouting orders. It looks more like a high-tech jawbreaker. It is a vertical vessel, dominated by a perfect sphere made of titanium. This sphere is the only thing that matters. The rest of the submarine, the fins, the batteries, the foam buoyancy blocks, is just decoration. The sphere is the only thing standing between you and being crushed into a soda can. You climb the ladder. The hatch is open, a small circular circle of darkness in the bright white hull. You have to take your shoes off. This isn't just politeness. It's survival. You can't risk bringing any grit or sand onto the seal of the hatch. A single grain of sand on the O-ring could create a microscopic gap. At the surface, that gap is nothing. At 11,000 meters, that gap is a water jet cutter that would slice the submarine and you in half. So, you check your socks. You check your pockets. You slide in. The interior is shockingly small. If you are expecting the bridge of the Enterprise, you are going to be disappointed. It is about the size of a roomy elevator or a very small walk-in closet. There are no seats, really. You just sit on the floor, curled up on some fire-resistant padding. The walls are curved and covered in screens, switches, and oxygen scrubbers. It smells of fresh rubber, silicone grease, and the nervous sweat of the pilot who is already strapped in next to you. "Welcome aboard," the pilot says. He doesn't look at you. He is busy flicking switches, going through a pre-dive checklist that is as long as a novel. You nod, trying to find a place for your legs that won't fall asleep in 20 minutes. You are going to be in this fetal position for the next 10 hours. I hope you didn't drink too much coffee this morning because, and this is a logistical reality that movies always skip, there is no bathroom. There's a plastic bottle and a curtain. Dignity is the first thing we leave behind on the surface. Then comes the sound that changes everything. The heavy thud of the hatch coming down. Then the spin, spin, spin of the locking wheel. The air pressure in your ears shifts slightly as the ceiling gauges. The sound of the ocean, the waves slapping the hull, the seagulls, the wind, are instantly cut off. The silence inside is sudden and heavy. Now, it's just the hum of the electronics and your own breathing. You feel a lurch. The crane is lifting you up. You are swinging in the air, a pendulum of titanium. Through the small viewport, which is about the size of a dinner plate, you see the horizon tilt wildly. Sky, water, sky, water. Then, with a splash that vibrates through the metal frame, you are dropped. You are bobbing on the surface. The radio crackles. Surface to sub. You are clear for descent. Good luck. The pilot flips a switch. The ballast tanks open. Air hisses out, replaced by heavy seawater. You feel the floor drop away beneath you, just a little, like an elevator starting its journey. You look out the window. This is the epipelagic zone, the sunlight zone. The water is a brilliant, crystalline blue. It's the color of a swimming pool in a David Hockney painting. Sunbeams dance through the water, creating curtains of light that fade into the deep. A school of tuna flashes by, silver bullets in the blue void. They look curious, darting toward your strange metal bubble before shooting away. Here's a mainstream history fact for you. We have mapped 100% of the surface of Mars and the Moon, but we have only mapped about 20% of the ocean floor in high resolution. We literally know more about the topography of other planets than we do about our own backyard. This has led to a massive, ongoing debate in the academic world. Some scientists argue that space exploration is a waste of money when we have an alien world right here that controls our climate and food supply. Others argue that the ocean is just wet and hard to see through, so why bother? It's the classic up versus down, funding war. Sitting here, sinking slowly, you are definitely on team down. The blue outside the window is changing. It is shifting from that bright turquoise to a rich royal blue. You are passing the 50-meter mark. The boat above you is gone. The sun is now just a bright ceiling far above. You realize something strange about the motion. On a boat, you rock side to side. But a submarine falling through the water doesn't rock. It is incredibly stable. It feels like you are sitting in a living room that is slowly being lowered into a basement. The only indication of movement is a stream of bubbles rushing up past the window and the digital depth gauge ticking up. 60 meters, 70 meters, 80 meters. The pilot checks the oxygen levels. Patu is steady, he mutters. He hands you a sandwich wrapped in plastic. Eat now, he advises. You won't feel like it later. He's right. The deeper you go, the heavy atmosphere inside the sub tends to kill your appetite. Plus, eating gives you something to do other than staring at the bolts on the hatch and wondering if they were tightened enough. You take a bite of the sandwich. It tastes like white bread and anxiety. You look back out the window. The royal blue has deepened into indigo. The red spectrum of light is the first to surrender to the water. If you were to cut your finger right now, your blood would look black, not red, because there is no red light down here to reflect it. You are leaving the world of humans. You are leaving the world of breathers, of walkers, of sunshine. You are slipping into a dimension that has existed for billions of years without us, a world that doesn't care if you are rich or poor, happy or sad. It only cares about one thing, pressure, and the pressure is building. You can hear the hull groan slightly, a metallic creak as the titanium crystals compress. It's the sub settling into its new shape. Just the settling noises. The pilot says, noticing your eyes widening. Totally normal. You nod, trying to believe him. You watch the last of the recognizable daylight fading. We are approaching the 200-meter mark, the edge of the twilight zone. The blue is becoming purple. The happy, sunlit ocean is gone. We are falling into the throe of the world, and there is no turning back now. We are now hovering. Well, falling really, at about 150 meters deep. If you look out the viewport, the water has taken on a quality that is difficult to describe if you haven't seen it. It's a thick, heavy cobalt. The cheerful, vacation brochure turquoise of the surface is a distant memory. The light here is solemn. It feels like standing in a cathedral made of blue stained glass just as the sun goes down. You might feel a false sense of security here. You can still see. If you hold your hand up to the window, you can see your own silhouette. It feels familiar, but don't let the light fool you. This specific layer of the ocean, the bottom half of the epipelagic zone, is actually one of the most dangerous places on the planet. Why? Because this is the hunting ground. As you stare into the blue void, your eyes start playing tricks on you. You see shadows that aren't there. You see shapes moving in the periphery. And then, suddenly one of those shadows solidifies. It glides out of the gloom with a terrifying, effortless grace. It's a shark, but not the great white you see on Shark Week, jumping out of the water to catch seals. This is an oceanic white tip. It has long, paddle-like pectoral fins tipped with white, looking like an airplane built for water. It doesn't swim like a fish, it flies. It circles your titanium sphere. Its eye, a black, unblinking button, locks onto you through the glass. There is zero aggression in its movement, which somehow makes it scarier. It's just inspecting. It is calculating. It is wondering if this giant metal jawbreaker is soft on the inside. Here's a mainstream historical fact for you to chew on while that shark chews on the idea of eating you. The oceanic whitetip is often considered the deadliest shark to humans, historically speaking, but not because of beach attacks. They are the scavengers of shipwrecks. During World War II, when the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed, hundreds of sailors went into the water. For 4 days, they drifted in this exact zone. The whitetips came. It is considered the worst shark attack in naval history. History isn't just dates and treaties. Sometimes, it's just biology taking advantage of tragedy. The shark loses interest. You are made of metal, and you don't smell like blood. With a flick of its tail, it vanishes back into the blue mist. It doesn't fade away. It just dissolves. This brings us to a fascinating, obscure biological fact: countershading. You might wonder why sharks and many deep-sea fish are dark on top and light on the bottom. It's active camouflage. If you are a prey fish looking up at the shark, its white belly blends in with the sunlight coming from the surface. If you are a bird looking down at the shark, its dark back blends in with the deep blue abyss below. They are invisible from every angle. It's nature's Klingon cloaking device. The sub continues to drop. 180 meters. 190 meters. The light is getting weaker. It's like someone is slowly turning a dimmer switch on the entire world. The cobalt is turning into a deep, bruised violet. You are now reaching the lower limit of the photic zone. This is a scientific boundary where photosynthesis becomes impossible. Above you, microscopic phytoplankton are using the sun to create energy, basically acting as a battery for the entire marine food web. Below this line, no plants, no solar energy. Everything living down there has to rely on food falling from above or eating each other. You are crossing the line from the producers to the consumers. This transition zone is the subject of a pretty heated academic debate, right now called the shifting baseline syndrome. Marine biologists act polite at conferences, but they get into serious arguments over this. The debate is, do we even know what a healthy ocean looks like? Some scientists argue that the ocean we see today is a ghost town compared to 150 years ago. They believe that before industrial fishing, this zone was so thick with fish you could practically walk on them. Others argue that ocean populations have always fluctuated wildly. Basically, we are trying to fix a machine when we lost the instruction manual a century ago. You look back at the window. The shark is gone, but now you see something else. Small, gelatinous blobs drifting past. Jellyfish, salps, ctenophores. They look like plastic bags filled with water, catching the last few photons of light. They are beautiful, but they are also a reminder of the isolation. You are enclosed in a bubble of air, intruder in a liquid world. The temperature inside the sub is starting to drop. 2. The tropical heat of the surface is gone. You pull your knees up to your chest. The hull of the sub is cool to the touch. The ocean is sucking the warmth out of the titanium. The pilot taps a gauge. Crossing 200 meters, he says. Goodbye, son. He reaches up and turns off the internal cabin lights. Best to let your eyes adjust now, he whispers. For a moment, panic flares in your chest. The darkness inside the sub is sudden. You look to the window for comfort, searching for that blue light. It's there, but it's faint. It's a ghost light. It's the color of a sky about 10 minutes after the sun is fully set. Just before the stars come out, you are leaving the epipelagic. You are leaving the known world, the comfortable, sun-drenched reality where humans make sense is floating away above you. You are sinking into the mesopelagic, the middle ground, the twilight zone. The silence seems to get louder. You can hear your own heart beating in your ears. Thump, 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 thump. It sounds oddly mechanical, like the ship systems. You realize that you are holding your breath. You exhale slowly, watching the condensation form on the cold glass of the viewport. The last trace of blue is fading to gray. The ocean is closing its eye. You are now drifting through the mesopelagic zone, better known as the twilight zone. We are between 200 and 1,000 meters deep. If you press your face against the cold plexiglass of the viewport, you might think you are looking at nothing. The blue has faded to a ghostly, washed-out gray that is barely brighter than black. But as your eyes adjust, and it takes about 20 minutes for human eyes to reach their maximum sensitivity, you realize that you are not looking at emptiness. You are looking at a gallery of evolution's weirdest experiments. In the sunlit world above, animals generally try to look normal. They have streamlined bodies, symmetrical faces, and reasonable proportions. Down here, the rules of beauty have been thrown out the airlock. You see something drift past that looks like a sad, deflated football with huge, tragic eyes. This is a hatchetfish. It is paper-thin, silver-sided, and permanently looks like it has just received terrible news. But look closer at those eyes. They aren't looking at you. They are looking up. In the twilight zone, death comes from below. Predators cruise underneath, looking up against the faint gray light of the surface to see the silhouette of their prey. To survive, the creatures here have evolved enormous, sensitive eyes that are permanently locked in an upward stare, searching for the shadow of a shadow. It's a life of constant paranoia. And speaking of eyes, here is your obscure biological fact for the night. You know how swordfish are usually thought of as surface jumpers? They actually dive down here to hunt. But the water here is near freezing, which makes brains and eyes react slowly. A bad thing for a high-speed predator. So, the swordfish has evolved a specialized heating system. It has a muscle near its eye that doesn't contract to create movement. It only vibrates to create heat. It literally warms its own brain and eyes, keeping them significantly hotter than the surrounding water. It is a warm-blooded sniper in a cold-blooded world. It's like they have built-in thermal night vision goggles. As the sub descends past 400 meters, the view becomes even stranger. You might see a flash of something that looks like a transparent fighter jet. This is the barrel-eye fish. Imagine a fish with a head made of clear cockpit glass. Inside that transparent dome, you can see its green barrel-shaped eyes rotating. It can look forward, or it can rotate its eyes inside its own skull to look straight up to the top of its head. It is one of the most unsettling things you will ever see. A creature that literally has a window into its own brain. The feeling inside the sphere is changing, too. The humidity is condensing on the cold metal walls. You wipe a droplet of water from your forehead. The pilot is quiet, watching the sonar. The pinging sound of the sonar is rhythmic, hypnotic. Ping, ping. This brings us to a major moment in history. We are retracing the path of the pioneers. In the 1930s, a naturalist named William Beebe and an engineer named Otis Barton built the bathysphere. It was a primitive steel ball, much cruder than the titanium luxury suite you are sitting in now. They were the first humans to dangle this deep. When Beebe looked out his quartz window at this depth, he didn't see a wasteland. He saw what he called explosions of sparks. He was the first to witness the bioluminescence of the deep ocean. Before his dive, mainstream science believed life couldn't exist under this much pressure. They thought the ocean was a dead zone below a certain depth. Beebe came back and told them it was like a fireworks display on the 4th of July. He was ridiculed at first, called a liar and a hallucinator, but he was right. He expanded the known boundaries of life on Earth by a vertical mile. You look out now, hoping to see what Beebe saw. And there it is, a tiny, flickering blue light in the distance. Then another. It's not the bright, steady shine of a flashlight. It's a pulsed chemical glow. This leads to a massive, ongoing academic debate known as the mesopelagic biomass paradox. Here's the situation. For decades, we used sonar to scan this zone. The sound waves would bounce off something massive. It looked like a false seafloor. It was so dense that early naval maps actually marked it as the bottom of the ocean. But it moved. It went up at night and down during the day. We realized it wasn't the floor. It was fish. Billions of them. Based on sonar, scientists estimated that the Twilight Zone contains 90% of the world's fish biomass. We are talking about 1 billion tons of fish. But here's the catch, literally. When researchers drag nets through this water to count the fish, the nets come up almost empty. So the debate is raging. Are the fish smarter than we think, dodging the nets because they can feel the pressure wave? Or are our sonar calculations completely wrong, and we are misinterpreting the echoes of jellyfish and squid as fish? It matters because if the sonar is right, this is the largest untapped food source on the planet. If the nets are right, it's a ghost town. Sitting here, looking at the sparse, glowing lights drifting past, it's hard to tell who is right. It feels empty, but you can sense the presence of life hiding in the dark, watching you. 600 meters. 700 meters. The gray is gone. The violet is gone. The window is now black. Not the black of a dark room where your eyes eventually adjust and you can see shapes. This is liquid black. It is a heavy, smothering darkness that feels solid. You feel a shift in your own psychology. In the sunlight, you felt like an explorer. In the Twilight Zone, you felt like an observer. Now, entering the darkness, you feel like prey. The window is no longer a view out. It is a view in for whatever is swimming out there. You catch a glimpse of something long and ribbon-like shimmering in the sub's external lights. A siphonophore. It's not a single animal, but colony of clones holding hands to create a creature that can be 40 meters long, longer than a blue whale. It drifts past like a living feather boa, silent and deadly, trailing stinging tentacles that act like a drift net. The pilot checks the depth gauge. Approaching 800 meters, he murmurs. The deep scattering layer is thick tonight. You wrap your arms around your knees. The cold is radiating off the walls now, seeping into your back. You are entering the zone of the vertical commuters. You are about to get stuck in the biggest traffic jam on Earth, but you won't see a single car. You will only see the glitter of 1 billion tiny eyes moving upward. You lean your head back against the padding. The surface world, the world of bills and emails and traffic lights, feels like a hallucination. The only reality is the pressure, the cold, and the dark. And we're still dropping. We are currently hovering at a depth that sits right on the edge of a phenomenon that makes rush hour in Los Angeles look like a peaceful country drive. You are checking the depth gauge. It reads 850 meters. Outside, the darkness is absolute, but inside the sub, the sonar screen has turned into a chaotic mess of red and orange blobs. The pilot frowns, tapping the glass of the monitor. Here they come, he says. The night shift. You look out the viewport. At first, it looks like it's snowing, but snow falls down. The snow is falling up. You are currently driving against the flow of the largest animal migration on the planet. It is called the Deal Vertical Migration. Every single night, billions, trillions actually, of creatures rise from the safety of the deep, dark ocean to the surface to feed on algae under the cover of moonlight. Then, just before dawn, they all race back down here to hide from the sun and the predators that hunt by sight. It is a daily commute that involves more biomass than all the human movement on Earth combined. And you are stuck right in the middle of it. The water outside is no longer empty. It is a living soup. Tiny, frantic shapes are zooming past your window, heading for the ceiling. Most of them are small, shrimp, copepods, krill, jerking their way upward with desperate energy. Their movement triggers their bioluminescence, so the darkness is suddenly streaked with flashes of neon blue and green. It looks like you are inside a warp drive from a sci-fi movie, but the stars are actually panic crustaceans. Among the crowd, you spot the most common vertebrate on Earth. You've probably never heard of it, and you've certainly never seen one in a zoo. It's the bristlemouth. It is an ugly little thing, about the size of your finger, with a jaw that can unhinge to eat things bigger than itself and rows of needle-like teeth. It looks like a deep-sea nightmare shrunk down to toy size. There are likely quadrillions of them out there. If you weighed every bristlemouth in the ocean, they would outweigh all the cows, chickens, and pigs on land combined. They are the silent majority of our planet, and right now, They are all late for dinner. This massive wall of moving meat brings us to a fascinating slice of military history. During World War II, the U.S. Navy was frantically mapping the Pacific, trying to hunt Japanese submarines. Their sonar operators kept running into a terrifying problem. In the middle of the day, their sonar would show the ocean floor at about 400 meters deep, but the chart said the bottom should be thousands of meters down. Then at night, this false bottom would disappear, and the sonar would read the true depth. Captains were terrified. They thought their equipment was broken or that they were running aground on Phantom Islands. It wasn't until after the war that biologists realized the sea floor the Navy was seeing was actually this migration. The layer of fish and krill was so dense that it reflected sound waves just like solid rock. Imagine a cloud of life so thick that military-grade sonar mistakes it for a mountain range. That is what is swimming past your face right now. But where there are commuters, there are highwaymen. You see a flash of red in the distance. Red is the stealth color of the deep because, as we mentioned, red light doesn't penetrate here. So, if you're red, you look black. You look like nothing. The shape moves closer. It's a Humboldt squid, also known as the red devil. It is about 2 meters long, armed with tentacles lined with razor-sharp teeth rings, not just suction cups. It flashes from red to white to red again, a strobe light of aggression. It isn't migrating. It is hunting the migrants. It shoots through the cloud of krill, tentacles flailing, leaving a trail of bioluminescent sparks in its wake. It slams into the side of your sub with a dull thud, testing the titanium, before realizing you are too hard to eat and jetting away. The pilot barely looks up. Squid check, he mutters. He's used to it. As you descend through this chaotic layer, you are witnessing a process that is currently the subject of a massive, high-stakes academic argument. It's called the biological carbon pump. Here's the gist. These tiny creatures swim up, eat carbon-rich food at the surface, swim down, and then, well, they go to the bathroom. Their waste sinks to the bottom, trapping that carbon in the deep ocean for centuries. Scientists are currently screaming at each other in academic journals about how much carbon this actually sequesters. Some argue that this migration is the only reason the Earth hasn't boiled over yet, that these tiny fish are doing more to fight climate change than every electric car ever built. Others argue that the efficiency is much lower, and we shouldn't bank our future on the bowel movements of lanternfish. It's a debate worth billions of dollars in climate modeling, and the answer is floating right outside your window, winking at you with blue lights. As you pass 900 meters, the crowd begins to thin out. You are dropping below the commuter belt. The snow stops falling up. The frantic energy of the migration fades above you. You are entering a quieter, colder space. The temperature outside is now about 4 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The condensation on the walls of the sphere is getting heavier. A single cold drop runs down the back of your neck, making you shiver. You take this moment to look at the strange dust that is drifting around the sub now that the fish are gone. It looks like dandruff. It's fuzzy gray and moves in slow motion. This is marine snow in its purest form. It is a detritus of the upper ocean falling endlessly into the deep. It is a mix of dead plankton, fecal pellets, dust from the Sahara Desert that blew into the ocean, and microplastics from your laundry. It is the only food source for the things living below us. The entire deep ocean economy is based on catching this falling garbage. It's a trickle-down economy that actually works, but the currency is slime. Here's a weird, obscure fact about this snow. It falls slowly, painfully slowly. A single flake of marine snow might take weeks to reach the bottom, but somehow, when fresh food arrives at the bottom, like a dead whale, the animals down there know about it almost instantly. How? Science isn't 100% sure. There is a theory that the ocean transmits smell through fast-moving currents we haven't mapped yet, or that animals form a bucket brigade of information. But the speed at which the news of food travels in the abyss is faster than the food itself. It's the deep sea telegraph. The pilot adjusts the trim of the sub. We are getting heavy. Passing 1,000 meters, he announces, you lean forward. This is a psychological barrier. 1,000 meters is the official start of the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone. In the twilight zone, there was still a theoretical trace of sunlight, even if your eyes couldn't see it. In the midnight zone, the sun has been mathematically erased. No photon from the sun has ever reached this depth in the history of the Earth. You are now deeper than the Burj Khalifa is tall. You are deeper than the hunting depth of a modern nuclear attack submarine. If the window were to crack now, the water would enter at the speed of a bullet. It would compress the air inside the sphere so fast that the heat generated would incinerate you before the water even drowned you. It is a very instant, very thorough way to go, but the sphere holds. The titanium doesn't care about your anxiety. It just does its job. The chaos of the migration is gone. The silence returns, heavier than before. You are entering the realm of the ambush predators. The things that don't chase, but wait. The things that sit in the dark with their mouths open, waiting for a piece of luck to fall from the sky. You settle back against the cold wall. The show is over. The commute is finished. Now, we enter the night that never ends. You are now officially crossing the 1,000-meter line. In the world of oceanography, this is a border more significant than any drawn on a map. You have left the mesopelagic and entered the bathypelagic, the midnight zone. The name isn't poetic. It is literal. From this point down to 4,000 meters, there is no sun. There is no moon. There is no starlight. The only light that exists in this world is the light that living things bring with them. The temperature outside the sphere has stabilized at a chilly 3.9 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. It will stay exactly this cold for the rest of the dive. The water here is dense, sluggish, and heavy. You press your forehead against the glass. The condensation is thick now, so you have to wipe a porthole with your sleeve. At first, it looks like you are staring into a pot of ink. But then you see it, a flash, a blink, a long glowing streak. You are not alone in the dark. You are floating through a galaxy of bioluminescence. Here is a mainstream science fact that always blows my mind. In the midnight zone, 90% of the animals glow. It isn't a rare superpower down here. It is the standard dress code. If you don't glow, you are invisible, which is good for hiding but bad for dating. You see a pale, bobbing light drifting toward the sub. It looks like a lonely lantern swinging in the wind. It's mesmerizing. You find yourself wanting to lean closer, to see what is holding the lantern. Don't. If you were a fish, that curiosity would be the last emotion you ever felt. The light is attached to a fishing rod, which is attached to the forehead of the most famous resident of the deep, the anglerfish. She, and it is definitely a she, drifts into the beam of the sub's external lights. She is the stuff of nightmares, but she is also a miracle of efficiency. Her skin is jet black and absorbs almost all light, making her invisible in the gloom. Her mouth is filled with translucent, needle-like teeth that fold backward. Once something goes in, the geometry of her jaw ensures it cannot come out. She doesn't chase food. She is a floating trap. She has the patience of stone. She can wait days or even weeks for a single meal. But the most bizarre thing about the anglerfish isn't her face. It's her love life. This brings us to one of the most obscure and frankly disturbing facts in biology: sexual parasitism. For years, scientists were confused because they only ever found female anglerfish. They couldn't find the males. They would find these females with tiny little parasites attached to their bodies. Eventually, someone put the parasite under a microscope and realized that's the husband. In this vast, dark emptiness, finding him made it statistically almost impossible. So, when a tiny male anglerfish sniffs out a female, he doesn't buy her dinner. He bites her. He latches onto her belly. Then, he releases an enzyme that dissolves his mouth and her skin, fusing their blood vessels together. He literally becomes a part of her body. His eyes rot away. His fins fall off. He becomes nothing more than a pair of gonads attached to her bloodstream, providing sperm whenever she is ready to spawn. A single female can have 3 or 4 husbands fuse her body at once. It gives a whole new meaning to attachment issues. It sounds horrific to us, but down here, it is the ultimate romantic commitment. Till death do us part wasn't strong enough, so they went with till biology fuses us into a single organism. The anglerfish drifts away, her husband's trailing along for the ride. As you descend past 1,500 meters, you spot another shape. This one looks like a black umbrella that has been turned inside out. It's a gulper eel, also known as the pelican eel. It is mostly mouth. Its jaw is so loosely hinged that it can open wide enough to swallow an animal twice its own size. Its stomach is like a rubber balloon that can stretch to accommodate the massive meal. Why? Because in the Midnight Zone, the restaurant has no menu and no opening hours. You eat what you find, even if it's bigger than you. You eat it all, because you don't know when the next meal is coming. It might be next month. The gulper eel floats past, looking like a grumpy muppet. Its long, whip-like tail ending in a tiny red light. Why red? Most predators down here can't see red light, but some of the gulper eel's favorite prey are red shrimp. So, it uses a flashlight that its food can reflect, but its enemies can't see. It's tactical lighting. This bioluminescence is the subject of fascinating academic debate called the burglar alarm theory. You see, some creatures down here, like certain jellies and shrimp, glow brilliantly when they are attacked. Why light up when you're being eaten? Isn't that just advertising your location to other predators? Well, that's exactly the point. The leading theory is that they scream with light to attract a bigger predator. The idea is, I'm being eaten by a medium-sized fish. Hey, giant fish, come eat this medium-sized fish so I can escape. It is a high-stakes gamble. You are inviting a monster to the party in the hopes that it eats your attacker instead of you. Academics are still arguing about the evolutionary math of this. Does it actually work often enough to justify the energy cost of the glow? Or is it just a panic reaction? Watching the sparks of light flickering in the distance, it looks like a silent war of signals, traps, and alarms. The sub shudders slightly. A deep, resonant groan echoes the titanium sphere. Pressure hull settling, the pilot says, not looking up from a Sudoku puzzle. We're at 2,500 psi. You try to visualize that number. 2,500 pounds per square inch. It's like having a rhinoceros standing on every single inch of the submarine. If you held a styrofoam cup outside the window right now, it would instantly shrink to the size of a thimble. The isolation here is profound. In the Twilight Zone, you felt like you were just deep underwater. Here, in the Midnight Zone, you feel like you are in space. The water is so clear and so dark that depth perception fails. Is that light 10 feet away or 10 miles? Is that shadow a small squid close up or a whale far away? Your brain starts to starve for sensory input. This is called the Ganzfeld effect. Hallucinations caused by exposure to an unstructured, uniform stimulation field. You might start hearing your name called in the hum of the air scrubbers. You might see faces in the condensation. Don't stare at the black too long, the pilot advises, flipping a page of his puzzle book. It stares back. He's joking. Probably. You close your eyes for a second to reset. When you open them, the bioluminescent show has changed. Instead of the chaotic flashes of the shrimp, you see something steady, a long, glowing line moving slowly in the distance. It looks like a train moving through the night. It's a siphonophore again, but a different kind. This one is glowing yellow. In a world of blue and green, yellow is rare. It feels alien. It moves with a rhythmic, pulsating grace, indifferent to your presence. You are drifting through a universe that doesn't know you exist. Humans have conquered the land, the air, and the surface of the sea. We have built cities, fought wars, and written libraries of history. But down here, in the Midnight Zone, we are nothing. We are just a transient bubble of air passing through a billion-year-old dark. And the scary part? We aren't even halfway to the bottom yet. The depth gauge reads 1,800 meters. The temperature outside is barely above freezing. The condensation on the walls is now a constant, slow drip, like a leaky faucet in an old house. You are sitting in the dark, watching the occasional bioluminescent spark drip by when you hear it. It isn't a mechanical sound. It isn't the ship. It starts as a rhythm. Click, click, click. It sounds like a metronome made of sledgehammers hitting concrete. It's loud. In fact, it is shockingly loud. It vibrates through the titanium hull, through the padding of the floor, and into your chest cavity. You don't just hear it. You feel it in your lungs. Sonar contact. The pilot whispers, his hands freezing over the controls. Big one. You are listening to the loudest sound made by any biological creature on Earth. This is the biosonar of the sperm whale. On the surface, we think of whales as gentle giants singing mournful songs to save the planet. Down here, they are not gentle. They are the apex predators of the abyss. The sound you are hearing is a biological gun. The sperm whale focuses sound waves through a massive organ in its forehead called the spermaceti organ, which is filled with waxy oil that early whalers mistook for semen, hence the awkward name. It fires these sound waves into the dark to visualize the world. And right now, that sound gun is pointed at you. The clicks speed up. Click, 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 click. This is called a creak. It means the whale has locked onto a target. For a terrifying second, you wonder if the whale thinks your titanium sphere is a giant, crunchy jawbreaker. Then, out of the darkness, a shape materializes. It is colossal. It looks less like an animal and more like a wrinkled, gray asteroid. The blocky head is the size of a minivan. The skin is scarred and battered, telling the story of 100 battles. It glides past your viewport with eerie stillness. It isn't swimming hard. It is simply falling, conserving oxygen for its dive. Here is a mainstream historical fact for you. The sperm whale is the inspiration for Moby Dick, but Herman Melville actually underestimated them. He wrote about them crushing boats, which they did, but he didn't know that these animals can dive to 3,000 meters and hold their breath for 90 minutes. Their blood is so rich in myoglobin, an oxygen-storing protein, that it is practically black. They are essentially swimming oxygen tanks. The whale ignores you. It has found something else. The sonar screen on the pilot's console lights up with a second shape. This one is different. It isn't a solid block. It is a tangle of lines. There, the pilot points. The Kraken. You press your face to glass. At first, you see nothing. Then, illuminated by the faint reflected glow of the sub's lights, you see a tentacle. It is thick as a fire hose and pale pink. It uncurls from the blackness, searching. You are looking at Arctopus ducks, the giant squid. For centuries, this creature was a myth. Sailors spoke of sea monsters that pulled ships under. Science dismissed them as drunk hallucinations until carcasses started washing up on beaches in the late 19th century. But seeing one alive here in its home turf, that is a privilege shared by fewer people than have won the lottery. The squid is huge, maybe 10 meters long, but it's the eye that catches you. It is the size of a dinner plate. It is the largest eye in the animal kingdom, evolved specifically to see the faint bioluminescence of predators. And right now, that eye is staring in terror at the approaching whale. What happens next isn't a fast-paced action movie fight. It is a slow, grappling horror match. The whale accelerates. The squid reacts, firing a cloud of ink. But ink is useless in the dark. It's a visual trick for the surface. Down here, the whale hunts with sound, and the ink is invisible to sonar. The squid lashes out. It wraps its two long feeding tentacles around the whale's head. This brings us to an obscure, slightly gruesome fact. The scars. If you look closely at the skin of an old sperm whale, you will see it is covered in circular ring marks. These are sucker kisses. The suction cups of the giant squid are not just rubbery plungers. They are lined with serrated rings of chitin, the same material as crab shells. They are essentially circular saw blades. When the squid grabs on, it isn't just holding. It is sawing into the whale's flesh. The battle is silent to your ears now, masked by the sheer mass of the water. But the vibration of the struggle shakes the sub. The whale opens its narrow, underslung jaw, which looks comically small for its head but is lined with teeth the size of bananas. It snaps. The squid is fighting for its life, thrashing, trying to gouge the whale's eyes. But the whale is a tank. It is 50 tons of muscle against 500 pounds of calamari. The outcome is inevitable. This specific interaction is the subject of a long-standing academic debate. The aggressive Kraken hypothesis. For a long time, based on the violent scars found on whales, scientists believed giant squid were aggressive monsters that actively fought whales. Some early theories even suggested they hunted baby whales. However, Modern video evidence suggests otherwise. The current consensus is shifting toward the idea that the squid is frantic and defensive, basically just flailing in panic while the whale methodically eats it. The battle is less of a boxing match and more of a lion eating a very scratchy gazelle. With a final, convulsing shudder, the squid goes limp. The whale turns, the tentacles still wrapped around its snout like war medals, and begins to ascend. It needs to go back to the surface to breathe and digest. The darkness swallows them both. The click, click, click fades into the distance. You are left alone in the silence again. The water around you is filled with the aftermath. Shreds of skin, a cloud of ink dissipating in the current, and the palpable energy of violence. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. It is a stark reminder that the deep ocean isn't just a museum of weird jellies. It is a battlefield. It is a place where titans fight in the dark, and usually nobody is there to see it. The pilot clears his throat, breaking the tension. Well, he says, that's something you don't see every Tuesday. He checks the trim. The sub is still heavy. We are still falling. Passing 2,000 meters, he announces. We're leaving the whale zone. Now we head for the mud. You lean back, trying to slow your heart rate. The image of that giant, eye staring out of the dark, will stay with you. You realize that down here, size doesn't guarantee safety. In the midnight zone, everything is food for something else. The adrenaline from the battle of the giants slowly fades from your bloodstream. The ocean returns to its default setting. Stillness, silence, and the vertical rain. We are passing 2,500 meters now. The water outside is no longer just dark. It feels ancient. The particles drifting past your window have changed character. Up higher, the marine snow was frantic and fast-moving. Down here, the flakes are larger, fluffier, and fall with lethargic, hypnotic slowness. You are looking at the primary food source for the bottom half of the world. And to be blunt, it is disgusting. If you were to open the hatch, which, again, please don't, and catch a flake on your tongue, you would be tasting a vintage blend of fecal pellets, decomposing jellyfish slime, soot from forest fires, and microplastics. It is the ocean's dandruff. But to the creatures down here, this is manna from heaven. It is the only way energy from the sun reaches the abyss, packaged in convenient bite-sized morsels of rot. Among this falling debris, you spot something that looks like a ghost. It's a translucent, floating blob the size of a basketball. It isn't a jellyfish. It's a snot palace. I'm not making that name up. Well, scientists call them giant larvaceans, but snot palace is the accepted colloquialism. This creature is actually a tiny, tadpole-like animal that spins a massive, intricate house out of mucus. It sits inside this balloon of snot and uses it to filter the water for food. Here is your obscure biological fact for this section. These mucus houses are marvels of engineering. They have complex internal filters, escape hatches, and flow channels. But the filters get clogged with debris every few hours. So the animal just dumps the house. It abandons its mansion and spins a new one. The old, heavy, mucus-filled house collapses and sinks rapidly to the bottom. These discarded palaces are actually super freighters of food delivery. They transport massive amount of carbon to the seafloor quickly before the bacteria in the upper water can eat it all. You're watching a disposable home become a DoorDash delivery for a sea cucumber 3 miles down. But sometimes the delivery is bigger than a snot ball. The pilot points to the sonar. Structure ahead, he says. Biological. You peer into the gloom. The sub's lights sweep across the darkness and catch the white gleam of bone. Massive. Curved ribs rise out of sediment like the arches of a ruined cathedral. It is a whale fall. When a whale dies, it doesn't just rot. It becomes an ecosystem. A single whale carcass contains more food energy than falls to the seafloor in 2,000 years of normal snow. It is a pop-up city of life in a biological desert. You drift closer to the ribcage. It is swarming with life. There are hagfish, those slime-producing eels, burrowing into the remaining flesh. There are crabs fighting over the scraps. But the real stars of the show are the things eating the bones. You see carpets of red, feathery plumes waving from the whale's ribs. They look like flowers. They are actually Ostax worms, also known as zombie worms. Here is a mainstream science fact. Bones are mostly calcium, but they also contain collagen and lipids fats. For a long time, scientists didn't think anything could eat bone underwater. Then they found O-Stax. These worms have no mouth and no stomach. Instead, they secrete acid from their roots to dissolve the calcium, and then rely on some biotic bacteria living inside them to digest the fats. They are literally acid mining the skeleton. But here's the weird part, the gender politics of the zombie worm. When scientists first studied these worms, they collected hundreds of them and realized they were all female. Every single one. They were confused until they looked closer at the female's body. Living inside the female gelatinous tube were dozens, sometimes hundreds, of microscopic males. These males never grow up. They are basically just larvae that exist solely to fertilize eggs. A single female keeps a harem of dwarf males inside her own body like a stash of reproductive snacks. It is efficient, sure, but it's definitely not something you want to think about too hard before a first date. This whale fall leads us to a depressing but fascinating academic debate, the whaling gap hypothesis. In the 19th and 20th centuries, humans killed millions of whales. We reduced some populations by 99%. Industrial whaling was a massacre. Now, marine biologists are arguing about what that did to the deep sea. The theory goes like this. Whale falls are stepping stones. Deep sea creatures like the zombie worms need these carcasses to survive and migrate. They can't swim thousands of miles without food. They hop from whale to whale. But when we killed all the whales, the distance between these food islands became too great. Some historians and biologists argue that we may have caused a mass extinction in the deep sea before we even knew it existed. We might have starved out thousands of species of specialized scavengers because we removed the supply chain of dead whales. The ecosystem you are looking at now might be a ghost of what was 200 years ago. It's a sobering thought that our demand for lamp oil in 1850 might have wiped out a species of worm at 3,000 meters that we hadn't even discovered yet. The sub drifts past the skeleton. The ribs are picked clean, white against the dark water. In a few years, they will be gone completely, dissolved by the worms, leaving no trace that a giant ever rested here. You leave the oasis behind. The food density drops. The snow thins out again. You are entering the abyssal zone proper. The pilot checks a notebook. Coming up on 3,800 meters, he says. Get your camera ready. We have a non-biological contact. You know what this means. 3,800 meters is a very specific number in oceanography. It is a resting depth of the most famous tragedy in maritime history. The mood in the sphere shifts. It stops being a nature documentary and starts becoming a graveyard visit. The playful weirdness of the snot palaces and zombie worms feels inappropriate now. You sit up straighter. You wipe the fog from the glass one last time. The sonar ping changes tone. It's bouncing off metal now, not bone. You are about to see how the ocean digests human arrogance. The sonar ping is different now. It isn't the soft, mushy return of a biological cloud, nor the hard, crisp echo of a rock wall. It is metallic. It is sharp. It sounds like a bell tolling in the dark. The pilot slows the descent. He adjusts the thrusters to hover. Altitude, 10 meters off the bottom, he says. Depth, 3,800 meters. We are at the site. You press your face against the cold viewport, straining your eyes. At first, there is only the endless, tan-colored mud of the abyssal plain, illuminated by the sub's floodlights. It looks like the surface of the moon, but wetter. Then, a wall of shadow emerges from the gloom. It rises up like a cliff face. But it isn't rock. It is steel. It is covered in long, dripping stalactites of rust. But the shape is unmistakable. It is a knife-edge prow of a ship. You are looking at the RMS Titanic. Seeing it in real life, or as real as it gets through a thick window, is a visceral shock. It doesn't look like the majestic ship from the 1997 movie. It looks like a beast that has been conquered by the planet. The once black paint is gone, replaced by a mottled orange and brown skin of corrosion. The famous railing where Jack held Rose is still there, but it is buckling, sagging under the weight of a century of pressure. Here is a mainstream historical fact you probably know, but feeling it is different. The bow of the Titanic slammed into the ocean floor at about 30 miles per hour. It didn't gently settle. It crashed. The force was so immense that the steel hull buckled and the entire front section buried itself nearly 60 feet deep into the sediment. That's why the ship looks like it is plowing through the mud forever. It is permanently frozen in the moment of impact. The pilot maneuvers the sub carefully. You drift up over the railing and onto the forecastle deck. The wood planking has been gone for decades, eaten by worms, leaving only the steel caulking strips and the massive anchor chains. But what really grabs your attention are the icicles. They are hanging off every edge, every rivet, and every piece of metal. They look like weeping willows made of rust. This brings us to a fascinating, obscure biological fact. These aren't just rust. They are alive. They are called rusticelles. In 2010, scientists discovered that these structures are actually condominiums for a specific type of bacteria called Halomonas titanicae. These microbes are extremophiles that love the cold, the dark, and most importantly, the taste of iron. They are literally eating the ship. They digest the steel and excrete it as these fragile, rust-colored structures. So, when you look at the Titanic today, you aren't looking at a static monument. You are watching a slow-motion feast. The bacteria are consuming about 400 pounds of steel every single day. The ship is being recycled. The iron that was mined from the earth, forged in Belfast, and shaped into a luxury liner, is being dissolved back into the ocean chemistry to build the shells of clams and the blood of whales. It is the ultimate, if somewhat tragic, recycling program. We drift aft, over the cavernous opening where the first funnel used to be. It's a black hole leading deep into the belly of the ship. This site is the center of a furious academic and ethical debate. The graveyard versus gold mine argument. On one side, you have archaeologists and descendants of the victims who argue that this is a mass grave. Over 1,500 people died here. They believe the site should be treated like a cemetery, untouched, preserved, and respected. They argue that every time a sub lands on the deck or a robot arm picks up a teacup, it desecrates a tomb. On the other side, you have salvagers and some historians who argue that the ocean is destroying the ship anyway. They say that in 20 or 30 years, the rusticelles will have eaten the structural integrity completely, and the Titanic will collapse into a heap of unidentifiable scrap. Their argument is, if we don't take the artifacts now, the ocean will take them forever. It is a race against biology. The sub drifts away from the main wreckage and out into the debris field. This is in many ways more haunting than the ship itself. The ship is a monolith. It feels impersonal. The debris field is human. You see a perfectly preserved ceramic bathtub glowing in the sediment. You see a scatter of coal that spilled from the bunkers. And then you see it, a pair of shoes. The leather has been tanned by the chemicals used to treat it, so it resists the bacteria. The laces are still tied. The shoes are lying right next to each other. The body that once wore them has dissolved completely, bones and all. Leaving the shoes behind is a perfect outline of where a person came to rest. It is a shadow grave. It hits you harder than the size of the ship. That was a passenger. That was someone who was cold and scared and wearing their best shoes. The pilot stays respectful. We don't touch anything. We just bear witness. Time to go, he says softly. We're burning battery. He engages the thrusters. The sub lifts. The lights sweep over the bridge one last time. The place where Captain Smith stood. And then the Titanic fades back into the darkness. It is a sobering realization. We spent millions of dollars building an unsinkable ship to conquer the ocean. The ocean didn't even flinch. It just swallowed it, and now, with the help of billions of tiny bacteria, it is slowly erasing the evidence. You check the depth gauge. For 1,000 meters. We are leaving the wreck behind, but we aren't stopping. The Titanic is sitting on the continental rise, which is just a lobby of the deep ocean. We are heading for the basement. We are entering the abyssal plains. The temperature drops another fraction of a degree. The water is clearer, emptier. You are leaving history behind and re-entering the wilderness. The haunting image of those shoes fades from your retina, replaced by the relentless black. You settle back into your seat. The journey is only halfway done. The real alien territory starts now. We are now drifting deeper past the 4,000 meter mark. The wreckage of the Titanic is long gone, swallowed by the darkness behind us. The dramatic cliffs and canyons of the continental slope have flattened out. Welcome to the abyssal plain. If you were hoping for more shipwrecks or giant monsters battling in the dark, I have bad news. You just entered the largest, flattest, and frankly, most boring landscape on planet Earth. Imagine the state of Kansas. Now, flatten it out even more, turn off the sun, cover it in 30 feet of beige slime, and stretch it out to cover half the globe. That is where you are right now. This is the abyss. The word comes from the Greek abyssos, meaning bottomless. For centuries, sailors thought this part of the ocean actually had no bottom. They thought if you dropped a cannonball here, it would fall forever. We know now that there's a bottom. But looking out your viewport, you can forgive them for thinking otherwise. It is just mud. Endless, tan, featureless mud. It is made of clay and the decomposed remains of plankton that have been falling for millions of years. It accumulates at a rate of about 1 centimeter every 1,000 years. If you were to step out of the sub, which would instantly turn you into a human pancake, and leave a footprint, that footprint would likely stay there undisturbed for the next 10 millennia. It is a place where time doesn't just slow down, it stops. But don't let the emptiness fool you. This isn't a dead zone. It is the kingdom of the sea cucumber. You see them everywhere. They look like purple, gelatinous sausages slowly vacuuming the seafloor. Here is a mainstream science fact. On the abyssal plain, sea cucumbers, holothurians, are the dominant life form. In some areas, they make up 95% of the total biomass. If aliens landed here, they wouldn't think Earth was a planet of the apes or the planet of the humans. They would name it the planet of the slow-moving tube steaks. They are the grazers of the deep, the wildebeest of the abyss, moving in slow motion herds across the sediment, eating mud, digesting the organic bacteria, and pooping out cleaner mud. Among this herd of cucumbers, you might spot something that looks ridiculous. It's a deep red blob that seems to be swimming with a cape. It's Enypnias eximia, affectionately known by marine biologists as a headless chicken monster. It is a swimming sea cucumber. It looks exactly like a raw chicken breast that has gained sentience and learned to fly. It is transparent, so you can see its digestive tract filled with mud. It is evolution saying, look, I gave up on aesthetics down here, okay? It works. But the real treasure of the abyssal plain isn't the wildlife. It's the rocks. Scattered across the mud, looking like spilled potatoes or burnt charcoal briquettes, are millions of black lumps. These are polymetallic nodules. Here is your obscure geological fact. These rocks grow, but they grow with agonizing slowness. A nodule takes about 1 million years to grow just a few millimeters. They are formed by metal precipitating out of the seawater around a tiny nucleus, like a shark tooth or a piece of shell. Some of the potatoes you're looking at right now started growing when T-Rex was walking the earth. They are ancient metallic pearls. And this brings us to the biggest, loudest, and most expensive academic and geopolitical debate in the ocean right now: deep-sea mining. You see, those ugly little rocks are packed with manganese, nickel, cobalt, and copper. These are the exact ingredients we need to build batteries for electric cars, wind turbines, and smartphones. The abyss is literally paved with the batteries of the future. The debate is fierce. On one side, you have mining companies and green tech advocates. They argue that picking these rocks up off the muddy floor is better than destroying rainforests to dig mines on land. They say if we want a green energy revolution, we need the metal, and the abyss is the least damaging place to get it. On the other side, you have marine biologists screaming stop. They argue that we have no idea what mining will do. The mining machines are massive underwater combine harvesters that would stir up plumes of sediment that could choke out the entire ecosystem for hundreds of miles. They argue that because everything grows so slowly down here, remember, the footprint lasts 10,000 years thing, the damage will be permanent on a human timescale. So, as you drift over this field of black potatoes, you're looking at the next geopolitical flashpoint. Is this a pristine wilderness that must be protected, or is it a harvestable resource that will save the climate? The silence outside offers no answers, only more mud. The pilot checks the systems. We're halfway across the plane, he says. Temperature is steady at 1 degree Celsius. You feel the cold now. It's penetrating the sphere. You wrap a blanket around yourself. The utter monotony of the view is starting to have a psychological effect. It's called sensory deprivation drift. Your mind starts to detach. You start thinking about weird things. Did you lock the front door? Does your dog wonder where you are? What does the color red look like? Just as you are about to doze off from the visual boredom, the terrain begins to change. The mud is broken by jagged rocks. The flat plane is rising up. The temperature gauge on the console flickers. It goes from 1 degree to 2 degrees, then 5 degrees. Heat spike, the pilot says, sitting up straighter. We're approaching the vents. You're leaving the boring, cold mud behind. You are about to enter the most toxic, violent, and biologically impossible environment on Earth. You are about to see where life might have begun. The temperature gauge is the first thing that tells you the world has changed. For the last 4 hours, the water outside has been a steady, bone-chilling 1 degree Celsius. Now, the numbers on the pilot's console are ticking up erratically. 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees. Vents ahead, the pilot says, his voice tight. Keep your eyes on the port window. We don't want to get too close. If we touch a chimney, we melt. You look out. The endless, boring mud of the abyssal plain has been replaced by a chaotic, jagged landscape of black rock. It looks like a war zone. And rising from the rocks are monuments to the planet's violence. The black smokers. They look like industrial factory chimneys made of charcoal, blasting thick, black clouds into the ocean. But that isn't smoke. It is superheated water, rich in dissolved minerals, shooting out of the Earth's crust at over 400 degrees Celsius, 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Wait, you might ask, why isn't it boiling? Here is a mainstream science fact. At this depth, the pressure is so crushing, over 400 atmospheres, that water literally cannot turn into steam. The pressure holds the water molecules together even when they are hotter than molten lead. It remains a liquid. If you were to somehow teleport a pot of this water to your kitchen, it wouldn't just boil, it would explode like a bomb. The view is mesmerizing. The water around the chimneys is shimmering, distorting the light like the air above a hot asphalt road in summer. It's a heat mirage at the bottom of the sea. But the most shocking thing isn't the geology, it's the biology. After hours of seeing nothing but lonely sea cucumbers and slow-moving fish, you are suddenly looking at a riot of life. It is crowded. It is vibrant. It is teeming. Massive clumps of giant tube worms, Riftia pachyptila, cover the rocks. They look like 6-foot-tall lipsticks. They have hard, white, plastic-like tubes, and protruding from the top are brilliant, blood-red plumes waving in the toxic current. This discovery in 1977 changed everything we knew about biology. Before that year, scientists believed that all life on Earth ultimately depended on the sun. Plants eat sunlight. Animals eat plants. Bigger animals eat those animals. No sun, no life. But down here, the sun is a myth. These creatures are powered by chemosynthesis. They are eating the poison. They convert the hydrogen sulfide, the stuff that smells like rotten eggs, into energy. They are aliens right here on Earth, running on a completely different operating system than the rest of us. You stare at the tube worms. They don't have mouths. They don't have stomachs. They don't have anuses. Here is your obscure biological fact for this section. Inside the body of a tube worm is an organ called a trophosome. It is packed with billions of symbiotic bacteria. The worm breathes in the toxic chemicals, feeds them to the bacteria, and the bacteria produce sugar for the worm. They are farming their own food inside their bodies. But here's the weird part. When a baby tube worm is born, it has a mouth and a gut. It swims around, finds a rock, and eats the bacteria. Once the bacteria are inside, the worm's mouth seals shut, its stomach disappears, and becomes a permanent closed-loop farm. It sacrifices its ability to eat in exchange for a lifetime supply of internal sugar. Drifting near the worms, you see something that looks like a snail, but it looks heavy. This is a scaly-foot gastropod, also known as an iron snail. This is the only animal on Earth known to incorporate iron into its skeleton. Its shell is made of iron sulfides. It is literally armored. If you put a magnet next to it, the snail would stick to it. It evolved as metal plating to defend itself against the venomous darts of predatory cone snails and the crushing pincers of crabs. It is a biological tank. The U.S. military is actually studying the snail's shell design to develop better armor for soldiers. Nature invented Iron Man millions of years before Marvel did. The pilot carefully maneuvers the sub. Watch the temp, he mutters. The external thermometer reads 50 degrees Celsius near the vents, but just a few meters away, it is freezing. If the sub gets caught in a plume, the sudden heat shock could crack the viewport. You are dancing on the edge of a volcano. This environment is the center of the most profound academic debate in science, the hydrothermal origin of life hypothesis. For a long time, Charles Darwin's idea was that life began in a warm little pond on the surface, struck by lightning. But many modern scientists argue that the surface of the early Earth was a nightmare, bombarded by asteroids and bathed in lethal UV radiation because there was no ozone layer. The debate posits, what if we all started here? The theory is that the microscopic pores in these vent rocks provided the perfect little cells to protect the first molecules. The heat provided the energy. The chemicals provided the food. Proponents of this theory argue that the last universal common ancestor, Luca, the great-great-great-grandmother of every human, oak tree, and mushroom, was a heat-loving microbe living on a black smoker. This debate has huge implications for NASA. If life can start here in the dark, fueled by chemical heat, then it doesn't need to be in the Goldilocks zone near a star. It could be on Europa, a moon of Jupiter, or Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, hidden under their icy crusts, huddled around underwater volcanoes just like these. Looking out the window, you aren't just looking at worms. You might be looking at a blueprint for life in the rest of the universe. The pilot taps the glass. We have to move, he says. The currents here are too unpredictable. He engages the thrusters to back away. The brilliant red of the tube worms and the shimmering heat of the vents slowly fade into the distance. The thermometer drops rapidly. 30 degrees, 10 degrees, 2 degrees. We are back in the cold. The visual transition is jarring. You go from a bustling, crowded city of weird creatures back to the desolate, empty black. The silence returns. You feel a sense of relief, though the energy at the vents was manic, toxic, and dangerous. It felt like a place where humans really don't belong. Now you are back in the void, but we aren't done descending. The abyssal plane is the floor of the bedroom, but someone has left the closet door open, and there are stairs leading down into the basement. We are approaching the edge of the Mariana Trench. The ground below you drops away. The radar altimeter, which had been reading a steady distance from the bottom, suddenly spins. The bottom is gone. You are crossing the Hadal boundary. You are leaving the abyss and entering the Hadal zone. Named after Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. Only the trenches remain now. The pressure is about to double. The danger is about to peak. You adjust your position on the floor, try and get comfortable, but the mood in the sphere has shifted. The pilot is no longer doing Sudoku. He is watching the hull integrity monitors. Here we go, he whispers. Into the gutter. The digital depth gauge flickers past 6,000 meters. If this were a video game, you would just unlock the final, hardest level. In oceanography, the specific depth is the borderline. You have left the abyssal zone behind. You are now entering the Hadal zone. The name comes from Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. It is a fitting title. This zone exists only in the deep trenches, the scars cut into the crust of the planet. While the abyssal plain was a vast, flat expanse covering most of the ocean floor, the Hadal zone is comprised of disjointed, narrow canyons. It accounts for the deepest 45% of the ocean's vertical range, but less than 1% of its total area. You are falling into the cracks of the world. You are entering the Mariana Trench. Here is a mainstream geography fact that you have probably heard 1,000 times, but it is necessary to visualize strictly for the scale. If you took Mount Everest, the tallest point on Earth, and dropped it into this trench, the peak would still be covered by 2 kilometers of water. You could fly a commercial airliner over the summit of Everest underwater without breaking the surface. That is the sheer, vertiginous scale of the hole you are currently sinking into. The pilot adjusts the trim of the sub. We're entering the subduction zone, he says. This trench exists because of a slow-motion car crash between tectonic plates. The Pacific Plate is slamming into the Mariana Plate. Because the Pacific Plate is older and colder, it is heavier, so it is being forced to dive underneath the Mariana Plate. You are literally riding down the slope of a tectonic plate as it descends into the Earth's mantle to be melted down into magma. The walls of the trench are miles apart, so you can't see them, but you can feel the confinement. The water pressure here is reaching 8 tons per square inch. To put that in perspective, imagine a person standing on one leg. Now, imagine that person is holding up 2 African elephants. Now, imagine that person is standing on a coin. That is a force pressing against every single inch of the glass viewport right now. You stare out into the black. You expect it to be dead. Surely, nothing can survive here? The abyssal plane had sea cucumbers, but this is hell. And yet, something moves. It is a ghost. It is pink, translucent, and looks like a tadpole that melted in the sun. It's a Mariana snailfish, Pseudoliparus swirii. It is the deepest living fish ever discovered. It has been found at depths of over 8,000 meters. It doesn't have scales. It has a gelatinous skin that looks fragile, like a wet tissue. If you brought it to the surface, it would essentially melt into a puddle of goo. But down here, the pressure holds it together. It is perfectly adapted. This brings us to a fascinating, obscure biological fact. Why are there no fish deeper than this? We have never seen a fish below about 8,200 meters. We see shrimp, worms, and anemones, but no fish. Why? It comes down to a molecule called TMAO, trimethylamine N-oxide. Here is a chemistry lesson. Pressure forces water molecules into the cells of animals, which crushes their proteins. To stop this, deep-sea fish load their cells with TMAO. It acts like a pressure brace, holding the proteins in shape. The deeper you go, the more TMAO you need. But there is a hard chemical limit. At around 8,200 meters, the concentration of TMAO required to survive the pressure would make the fish's cells salter than the seawater outside. Osmosis would reverse. The fish would stop functioning. And here is the kicker. TMAO is a chemical that gives fish their fishy smell. The reason rotting fish smells so strong is that bacteria break down TMAO into trimethylamine. So, theoretically, the Mariana snailfish is the smelliest creature on Earth. It is super saturated with fish smell just to stay alive. As the snailfish wiggles away, looking fragile and invincible at the same time, you start to notice the debris again. We are back to the funnel effect. Because the trench is a V shape, everything that falls into the ocean eventually rolls down the sides and ends up here. It is the ultimate dustpan of the ocean. You see a rock, then a piece of wood, and then, is that a plastic bag? Yes, it is. This is the center of a depressing but critical academic discovery, the Hadal pollutant paradox. A few years ago, scientists sent landers down here to collect amphipods, tiny shrimp-like scavengers. They expected them to be pristine, untouched by humanity. Instead, they found that these creatures had higher levels of PCBs, banned industrial chemicals, in their bodies than crabs living in the polluted rivers of China. How? The biological carbon pump we talked about earlier. Microplastics and chemicals bind to the marine snow and sink. When they hit the trench walls, they roll down and concentrate at the bottom. The trench concentrates our garbage. The most isolated animals on Earth are eating our credit cards and our Teflon pans. It's a gut punch. You are 6 miles down, further from civilization than you have ever been, and civilization beat you here. The sub shutters. It's a loud metallic bang. You jump. Your heart at your throat. You look at the pilot. He doesn't look bored anymore. His hand is hovering over the ballast release, the panic handle that drops the weights and shoots us to the surface. Thermal contraction, he says, his voice tight. The titanium is shrinking in the cold. It's just a frame adjusting. You look at the bolts around the hatch. You know, intellectually, that the sphere is shrinking under this pressure. The diameter of the submarine has actually decreased by about 6 millimeters. You are being squeezed. The sphere is getting smaller around you. The psychological weight of the Hadal Zone sets in. It is a phenomenon known to deep-sea pilots as the break-off. It's the feeling that the surface world is no longer real. The sun, the wind, your family, they feel like a dream you had once. The only reality is the dark, the cold, and the number on the depth gauge. 6,500 meters. 7,000 meters. The descent feels faster now, even though it isn't. It's gravity pulling you toward the center of the Earth. The water outside is actually increasing in density. At the bottom of the trench, the water will be about 5% denser than at the surface. It is so compressed that the molecules are packed tighter together. You're falling through heavy water. The pilot checks the oxygen scrubbers. See, O2 levels are good, he says, but we're burning through heat faster than I liked. The cold is aggressive here. It radiates through the hull, sucking the warmth out of your body. You can see your breath in the air. The condensation on the walls has turned to frost in some places. You wrap your arms around yourself. You are entering the territory of the pioneers. You are approaching the depth where, in 1960, two men in a steel balloon had the scariest moment of their lives. We're coming up on 8,000 meters, the pilot says. We are now deeper than the height of the death zone on Everest. You look out at the void. It feels hungry. It feels patient. It has waited millions of years for visitors, and it doesn't seem particularly happy that you have arrived. We are passing 9,000 meters. You are now entering the territory of legends. Only a handful of vehicles have ever been this deep. The most famous of them was not a sleek, high-tech titanium sphere like the one you are sitting in now. It was a monster. It was called the Trieste. The year was 1960. The Cold War was freezing. The space race was heating up. But while everyone was looking at the stars, the U.S. Navy bought a strange invention from a Swiss professor named Auguste Piccard. It looked like a giant underwater blimp. Here is a mainstream history fact. The Trieste was not a submarine. It was a bathyscaphe. Submarines use compressed air to control buoyancy. But at this depth, compressed air tanks will be crushed instantly. So, Piccard had a brilliant, slightly insane idea. He filled a massive, thin-walled metal float with gasoline. Why gasoline? Because gasoline is lighter than water, and more importantly, it is incompressible. You can squeeze gasoline with all the pressure of the ocean, and it won't shrink. It provided the lift to keep the heavy steel observation gondola from sinking like a stone. So, the first trip to the bottom of the world was basically two guys sitting under a giant bomb filled with 22,000 gallons of aviation fuel. The two men inside were Don Walsh, a stoic U.S. Navy lieutenant, and Jacques Piccard, the son of the inventor. They were crammed into a steel sphere much smaller than yours. They had no heater. They had no high-tech dashboard. They had Geiger counters and stopwatches. As you descend past 9,500 meters, try to imagine what happened to them right around this depth. It was the loudest sound they had ever heard. Bang! The entire ship shook violently. The instrument dials fluttered. Dust rose from floorboards. In a normal submarine, a sound like that at this depth means you are already dead. It means the hull has imploded. But Walsh and Piccard were still breathing. They looked at each other. They were alive. They checked the instruments. Everything seemed fine. They had a choice. They were 7 miles down. They could drop their iron shot ballast, which was held in place by electromagnets, and rocket back to the surface. Or they could assume it was just the settling of the ship and keep going. They chose to keep going. Here is your obscure historical fact. It wasn't until they were much deeper that they realized what had happened. It wasn't the hull. It was the window. The Trieste had a thick plexiglass cone for a viewport, but there was a second window in the entry tunnel, the passage they crawled through to get into the sphere. That outer window had cracked under the pressure. It didn't shatter, but a massive fissure had run across it. If that window failed completely, the entry tunnel would flood, throwing the ship off balance, or worse, the pressure wave would compromise the sphere. But they didn't know that yet. They just sat in the cold, listening to the creaking of the metal, trusting the math. It remains one of the greatest examples of steely nerves in exploration history. You look at your own window. It is made of acrylic plastic, 14 centimeters thick. It is conical, meaning the water pressure actually pushes it harder into the frame, making the seal tighter the deeper you go. It is designed to be stronger than the hull itself. But remembering the sound of that crack in 1960 makes you pull your knees back in the glass just a little. As the Trias approached the bottom, something happened that sparked a debate that continues to this day. Jacques Piccard looked out of his tiny window and claimed he saw a fish. He described it as a flatfish, like a sole or a flounder, about a foot long, with two eyes on top of its head. He said it looked at the sub and swam away. This leads to the Hadal fish controversy. For decades, the sighting was taken as fact. It was proof that life could exist at the very bottom. But as we learn more about biology, specifically the TMAO limit we discussed earlier, biologists started to get skeptical. Fish shouldn't be able to exist below 8,200 meters. Their cells should implode. Modern critics argue that Piccard, peering through a tiny, cracked, distorted window into the cloudy mud, probably made a mistake. They think he saw a holothurian, a sea cucumber, or maybe a translucent worm, and his brain, desperate for a familiar shape, interpreted it as a fish. It's a fierce argument. Piccard went to his grave insisting he saw a fish. Biologists insist physics says no. It's the deep-sea equivalent of the Bigfoot debate. Was it a miracle of evolution or a trick of the eye in the dark? You drift past 10,000 meters. You are now in the Challenger Deep proper. This is the deepest scar in the trench. The walls are narrowing. The pilot slows the descent rate. Dropping ballast, he says. You hear the mechanical whir of weights being released. The sub slows its fall. We want to land gently. If we crash, we stir up a cloud of sediment that will blind us for hours. The water here is dead still. It would take days for the dust to settle. The temperature is now just above freezing. The pressure is 1,000 atmospheres. That's 1 ton of pressure on every square centimeter of your body. You are deeper than commercial airliners fly high. You have traveled further vertically than you usually travel horizontally to get to work. You think about Walsh and Piccard, shivering in their gasoline balloon. They stayed on the bottom for only 20 minutes before the cold and the cracked window forced them up. You are standing on the shoulders of giants who were crazy enough to go first. Altitude 50 meters. The pilot says, "We are getting close to floor." You strain your eyes against the black. You are looking for the bottom of the world, the ultimate basement, the place where the map ends. We are now passing 10,500 meters. We are deeper than any commercial submarine, any whale, and almost any machine has ever gone. We are in the final stretch. As we fall through the silent, crushing void, it is impossible not to think about the man who did this alone. In 2012, 52 years after Walsh and Piccard's bouncy gasoline adventure, a bright green, vertical torpedo dropped into this trench. Inside was not a team of Navy officers or scientists. It was a Hollywood director, James Cameron. Now, it is easy to dismiss Cameron as the guy who made Avatar and has too much money, but that is unfair. In the world of deep-sea exploration, Cameron is the real deal. He didn't just buy a ticket. He helped design the machine, his vessel. The deep-sea Challenger looked nothing like the Trias or the sub you are in now. It was a vertical torpedo. It stood 24 feet tall and was designed to plummet straight down like a lawn dart. Here is a mainstream historical fact. When Cameron made his dive, he became the first person in history to reach the bottom of the Mariana Trench solo. Walsh and Piccard had each other to talk to when the window cracked. Cameron had only himself and the creaking of the metal. If he panicked, there was no one to calm him down. If he passed out, there was no one to flip the ballast switch. It was the ultimate act of introversion. Imagine the claustrophobia. The pilot's fear in the deep-sea Challenger was a steel ball only 43 inches wide. That is smaller than the inside of a washing machine. Cameron is a tall guy, 6 feet 2 inches. He couldn't straighten his legs. He couldn't stretch his arms. He was folded up like a piece of origami for 7 hours. He had to do yoga for months just to be flexible enough to endure the torture of sitting in the sub. It was essentially a high-tech, pressure-resistant coffin. As he descended, the sub literally shrank around him. This brings us to a fascinating engineering fact. Syntactic foam. To build a sub that wouldn't be crushed, Cameron couldn't use gasoline like Picard, too flammable, too heavy. And he couldn't use normal metal for the body, too heavy. So, his team invented a new material. The beam of his sub was made of special foam composed of millions of microscopic hollow glass spheres embedded in epoxy resin. It feels like hard plastic on the surface. But at this depth, under this pressure, the entire 24-foot submarine compressed by about 2.5 inches. It shrank. The foam structure absorbed the pressure, warping and groaning. Cameron described the sound of the sub as he descended. A sharp crack like a gunshot would go off every few minutes as a different part of the foam structure adjusted to the load. Imagine sitting in a dark, freezing washing machine at the bottom of the world while someone shoots a pistol next to your ear every 10 minutes. That was his Tuesday. But the scary part wasn't the noise. It was the silence. When Cameron finally landed, he planned to spend hours driving around, collecting rocks and filming animals. But the ocean had other plans. Almost immediately after landing, a hydraulic line burst. Fluid sprayed out into the water. His robotic arm, the only way he could interact with the world outside, went dead. Then his thrusters started failing. He was spinning in circles. He was a lame duck. He was sitting at the deepest point on Earth, inside a billion-dollar machine, and he couldn't do anything but look out the window. He later described the feeling not as fear, but as a profound sense of isolation. He felt like he had traveled to another planet, only to find it completely empty. I felt like the most solitary human being on the planet, he said, more isolated than an astronaut on the moon. This solo mission brings up a heated academic debate. Man versus unmanned exploration. There is a huge camp of scientists who argue that sending humans down here is stupid. It is dangerous, expensive, and inefficient. A robot doesn't need a life support system. It doesn't need a bathroom. And if it implodes, you just build another one. They argue that Cameron's dive was a vanity project, a stunt. They say we could have mapped the entire trench with drones for a fraction of the cost. The other camp argues that a robot cannot feel. A robot cannot look at a rock and say, "That looks weird. I'll check that out." They argue that the human element, the inspiration, the fear, the awe, is what drives funding and public interest. Nobody throws a parade for a robot. But when a human touches the bottom, the world watches. Drifting past 10,800 meters, you realize you are siding with the man camp. Being here, physically, feels different. Knowing that your own fragile body is hanging in this void adds a weight to the experience that a 4K video feed on a monitor could never replicate. You look at the pilot. He is sweating now, despite the freezing cold. The condensation is dripping off his nose. This is hard work, keeping the sub stable, monitoring the life support, fighting the urge to think about the 16,000 psi outside. It takes a toll. Altitude 20 meters, he says. I have visual on the bottom. You lean forward. The lights of the sub cut through the eternal night. And there it is. It isn't a rocky canyon. It isn't a dramatic volcano. It is beige. It is flat. It looks like a pool of spilled latte. It is the bottom of the Challenger Deep. It looks so soft. It is a layer of diatomaceous ooze, the microscopic skeletons of plankton that have settled here for eons. It looks like you could sink into it up to your waist. You are hovering just above the final destination. The journey of 4 hours is about to end. You are about to touch the skin of the planet. The pilot's hand hovers over the thruster controls. He taps them gently. Puff, puff. The sub slows to a crawl. Contact in 3, 2, 1. You brace yourself for a crash or a thud or a crunch, but there is nothing. The landing is softer than a feather falling on a pillow. The sub settles into the bottom of the world with a gentle, silent sigh. A cloud of tan dust, the diatomaceous ooze, billows up around the viewport like a smoke grenade, obscuring the view for a moment. "We are down," the pilot whispers. He sounds exhausted. He points to the depth gauge. 10,925 meters. You are sitting at the bottom of the Challenger Deep. You unbuckle your harness. You lean forward. The dust cloud slowly settles, revealing the landscape. Honesty time. It is underwhelming. If you were expecting a dramatic, jagged hellscape with lava and monsters, you're looking at the wrong planet. The bottom of the trench looks like a parking lot covered in wet cement. It is flat. It is beige. It is featureless. It stretches out in every direction, illuminated only by the small pool of light from your sub. Beyond that pool is a darkness, so heavy it feels physical. But then, you start to think about where you are. You are sitting in the seam of the world. This is the exact point where the Pacific Plate is being shoved under the Mariana Plate. You are literally sitting inside the wound of the Earth. Here is a mainstream science fact to give you vertigo. The water pressure outside is now roughly 16,000 pounds per square inch. If the pilot were to open the hatch, which would be the worst idea in history, the water wouldn't just rush in. It would enter at supersonic speed. It would cut you into pieces, compress the air bubble to the size of a marble, and incinerate the remains instantly due to the heat of compression. It would all happen faster than your brain could process the signal of pain. You would be dead before you knew you were wet. You stare at the beige mud. It looks lifeless. But look closer. Something is moving in the silt. Tiny white. Flea-like creatures are swarming around the skids of the sub. They are amphipods, Hirundo gigas. They look like regular garden variety shrimp, but they are biological tanks. Here is your obscure, mind-blowing biological fact. At this depth, calcium carbonate, what shells are made of, dissolves. The water is corrosive to bones and shells. So, how do these shrimp survive without their exoskeletons dissolving into mush? Scientists discovered that Hirundo gigas has evolved a unique gut enzyme that processes local sediment to extract aluminum. They literally coat their bodies in a gel of aluminum hydroxide. They are wearing aluminum armor. They are the knights of the abyss, protected by metal shielding they manufacture themselves. They are biting at the sub's landing skids, probably wondering if this giant titanium intruder is made of something tasty. The pilot switches off the exterior floodlights for a moment. "Watch this," he says. The blackness returns, absolute and total. But then, you see it. The mud begins to glow. It isn't the flashing blue of the fish above. It is a faint, ghostly green shimmer in the sediment itself. You are looking at bacteria. Trillions of them. This leads to the most profound academic debate in modern geology, the deep biosphere or the interterrestrial theory. For centuries, we thought life existed on the crust of the Earth. But recent core samples taken from deep ocean drilling suggest that rock deep under the seafloor is packed with microbial life. These bacteria live in the tiny cracks of the rock, miles beneath the bottom of the ocean, eating hydrogen and rock minerals. They reproduce maybe once every 1,000 years. They move in geological time. Some scientists estimate that if you added up all the bacteria living inside the rocks of the Earth's crust, they would outweigh all the life on the surface combined. We are just a mold growing on the skin of the orange. The real biomass is inside the fruit. You are sitting on top of a hidden planet of life that we barely know exists. The pilot turns the lights back on. The beige reality snaps back. "Time check," he says. "We can stay for 20 minutes. Then we have to leave. The batteries don't like the cold." You spend the next few minutes just looking. You try to imprint this image in your brain. The beige mud, the white shrimp, the black horizon. You feel a strange emotion. It isn't triumph. It isn't fear. It's humility. This place doesn't need you. It doesn't want you. It has been here for millions of years, in the dark and the cold, grinding slowly as the continents drift. Your presence here is a glitch, a momentary flicker of light in an eternity of shadow. You take a picture with your phone through the viewport. It looks like a picture of a dirty sidewalk at night. Nobody back home will understand what it means. But you know. "Okay," the pilot says, his hand moving to the ballast controls. "Say goodbye." He pulls the lever. Clang. The iron weights, two massive slabs of steel attached to the bottom of the sub, drop away. They fall into the mud. They will stay there forever, the only footprint you leave behind. Freed from the weight, the sub lurches. It feels like an elevator starting up fast. The floor pushes against your feet. You see the beige mud drop away. The white shrimp scatter. The darkness swallows the bottom of the world. You are rising. The numbers on the depth gauge start to tick backward. 10,920, 10,900, 10,800. You lean back against the wall. The adrenaline crash hits you hard. You are suddenly exhausted. You have touched the bottom, but now you have to face the longest part of the journey, the ascent. It will take 4 to 5 hours to get back to the surface. 5 hours of sitting in the dark, watching the numbers tick down, listening to hull groan as it expands back to its original shape. You close your eyes. You imagine the sunlight. It feels like a concept from a sci-fi novel. Up there, people are drinking coffee, walking dogs, and complaining about the weather. Down here, there's only the pressure and the aluminum shrimp. The sub rocks gently as it picks up speed. You are a bubble of air rising through a column of water that could crush a city. You are going home. The ascent is not a thrill ride. It is a slow vertical commute. You are sitting in the dark, watching the depth gauge tick backward. The adrenaline that kept you sharp at the bottom has evaporated, leaving you with a heavy, narcotic fatigue. You are just a passenger in an elevator that goes up for 4 hours. 8,000 meters, 6,000 meters. As you rise, the submarine begins to sing. On the way down, the hull was contracting, squeezed by the pressure. Now, as the pressure releases, the titanium is expanding back to its original shape. It groans. It pops. It makes sharp, cracking sounds like a house settling in winter. Every pop echoes in the small sphere, a reminder that the only thing keeping the ocean out is metal that is currently changing size. You pass the 4,000 meter mark. The abyssal plain is far below you now. This brings us to a mainstream medical fact. The bends. You might be wondering why you don't have a stop for decompression. Stops like a scuba diver. When divers go deep, nitrogen dissolves into their blood. If they come up too fast, that gas bubbles out like open and shaken soda can, causing agony or death. But you are fine, because the hull is rigid. The air pressure inside the sphere never changed. You have been at surface pressure the whole time. You are effectively sitting in a magical bubble of sea level air that just happened to take a trip to the basement, 2,000 meters. You are back in the midnight zone. The bioluminescence returns, flashing past the window like streaks of rain on a highway windshield. And then you hear it. At the bottom, it was silent. But as you pass 1,000 meters, a low, droning hum begins to vibrate through the hull. It is the sound of global shipping. This leads to a massive, heartbreaking academic debate. The acoustic smog crisis. Sound travels 4 times faster in water than in air. Low-frequency sound, like the thrum of a container ship's massive propeller, can travel for thousands of miles underwater. Marine biologists argue that we have blinded the whales. Whales used to be able to communicate across entire oceans. Now, the ocean is so loud with the background roar of 50,000 merchant ships that a blue whale can barely shout till it's made 100 miles away. We have turned their cathedral into a construction site. 500 meters, 200 meters. You see it, the faint, gray light of the sun. After 10 hours of absolute black, the light looks impossibly bright. It hurts your eyes. The water turns from black to indigo, then to royal blue. 50 meters. The water is turquoise now. You can see the shadow of the support ship above you, a dark oval on the surface. 10 meters. Splash. The sub breaches the surface. The motion changes instantly. The smooth, stable fall of the deep is replaced by the sickening, rolling chop of the waves. You bob like a cork. The pilot blows the ballast tanks. You hear the hiss of air. The sub rides high. You hear the clank of the divers jumping onto the hull. Then, the heavy grinding of the hatch while being spun. Hiss! The seal breaks. The hatch swings open. The air that rushes and hits you like a physical blow. It is hot. It is humid. It smells of diesel fuel, salt spray, and melting plastic. Here is your final, obscure sensory fact, the smell of life. Astronauts returning from spacewalks say space smells like seared steak. Deep-sea explorers say the surface air smells sweet. Your brain has been starved of complex scents for 12 hours. The smell of the ocean, which seemed funky this morning, now smells like perfume. It smells like survival. You climb out of the hatch. The tropical sun hammers down on you. Your eyes water in the glare. You grab the railing of the ship, your legs wobbly. You look down at the water. It is just a blue surface again. The monsters, the mud, the vents, and the silence are all hidden away beneath the reflection. It looks innocent, but you know the truth now. You know that the blue surface is just a thin wrapper around a planet-sized world of darkness. You've been to the other side. You take a deep breath. You are back. You are safe. You are heavy. Now, the journey is over. The ship has stopped its engine. The ocean is calm. You don't have to be brave anymore. You don't have to watch the oxygen gauge. You don't have to worry about the pressure. You are back in your own room. The air around you is still and cool. The light is dim. The only sound is the soft hum of the world sleeping around you. Close your eyes. Can you still feel the gentle sway of the water? Not the violent rocking of the storm, but the slow, rhythmic cradle of the deep. That slow, heavy motion that rocks you back and forth, back and forth. Imagine you are floating in that water now, but it isn't cold. It is warm. It supports you completely. You are weightless. All the tension in your shoulders, all the noise in your head is just sediment. It is heavy, and it is sinking away from you. Let it fall. Let it drift down into the dark, miles below you, where you don't have to carry it anymore. You are floating on the surface. Looking up, the sky is a deep velvet blue. The stars are out. They are steady and quiet. Your breathing is slow, in and out, like the tide. There is nothing left to explore tonight. The map is finished. The hatch is locked. The monsters are asleep in the dark, and you are safe in the light. Let your body sink into the mattress. Let gravity hold you. It's a good weight. It anchors you here in this safe, warm place. Drift, float, sleep,